Hello, music lovers, and welcome to Under the Influence episode 2. This one is all about Dan Huff. Hello, music lovers. Welcome to Under the Influence, episode 2. This one is going to be on my main man, Dan Huff. Gosh, he was such a big influence on me. Y'all don't even know. When I first got into playing electric guitar, you guys do know that I love Brent Mason, and I was always digging through 90s Nashville records to find things that Brent had played on and that kind of thing, right? Well, one of the things I would catch is this guy, Dan Huff. I was like, yo, this dude is ripping. He gets great tone, great playing. So I immediately went back and did homework. Well, here's some back history for you. Dan Huff was in an 80s band called Giant. They had all kinds of the mega arena rock kind of sound. One of my favorite tracks was Time to Burn. Okay, it was off that record and it had this really ripping, almost Steve Vai sounding kind of intro. You know, it kind of, I just seen the movie Crossroads with like Steve Vai dueling as Jack Butler. And then around that same time, I heard Time to Burn. And it came in with that vicious intro. And I was like, yo, this guy's awesome. I like how fiery he is. So from there, Dan relocated down to Nashville. And he was playing on a lot of sessions throughout the 90s. He was playing on the little solo I did unaccompanied right at the beginning of the episode. That's from Reba McEntire record called Heart is a Lonely Hunter. And I just thought the tone was so juicy on that, man. It just sounded so good. And Dan also had this way of like bending and putting these little slur ghost notes in where specifically in that solo, there's an E that's like bent and he kind of keeps playing the string as he's wiggling the string. And man, it just like, it's so like sassy and like rubber band sounding. He just had it, he's got such a great touch. Other notable sessions, right? Clint Black, Summer's Coming. He rips on that. If I'm not mistaken, Ben Eller put up a lesson video on that a year or so ago, or maybe 2 years now. It's when I think the first time he heard it, I'd sent it to him. I was like, yo, listen to Dan play on this country track. And so jump over to Ben's channel if you want to learn that solo, if he's still got it up. You have to dig through the archives. Another thing that people don't realize is when Whitesnake did their radio re-release of Here I Go Again, they had recut the solo. I think originally, you know, it was probably like an Adrian Vandenberg, somebody like that. But on the recut, Dan Huff played the radio re-release of Here I Go Again. Killer tone, killer playing, chops galore. Fast forward, right? He becomes producer, works his way through the session ranks on the ladder to producing. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, his first big mega artist that he produced was Shadazy. Now, I would have to go back and maybe dig through some Google to see, you know, what records he was producing at the time. But if I'm not mistaken, that's the first one I remember him doing and seeing him as producer. It was kind of like an all-girl group, right? It was the band was Shadazy. That was his first, session that he produced. So from there, he went on to produce those Keith Urban records, man, that sound great. Great playing, great production. Obviously, Keith Urban, arena artist. You can't really get any bigger than that. My old bosses that I toured with, Rascal Flatts, he produced some of that stuff and played on it. There's a great solo on one of the first, maybe the first or second Flatts records. So Dan played on that song, While You Loved Me. That old, and like I said, it was on one of the first Flatts records. And it's just got this real watery, textury kind of thing in the background. And then the solos, like cape blowing in the wind, mountaintop, you know, eagles are soaring kind of lead tone. Dan's forte, outside of just a ridiculous amount of chops, Dan's forte was always getting really great tones, man. He would load up a compressor and play on the neck pickup, and it always sounded nice and throaty. And then his bridge lead tones with like a lot of gain always just sounded so searing without sounding harsh and painful. And Dan was never shy about, you know, lots of delays and verbs and getting it all ambient, huge sounding. I have a really great story for this Under the Influence. This is my Dan Huff story, right? I haven't worked with Dan directly, you know, indirectly through flats or whatever. But when I was a youngster, I had a friend of mine, her name was Dawn, and Dawn went to Belmont. Belmont is a university in Nashville that has a great music program, specifically a great music business program, right? Well, they would have in guest speakers, you know. So Dan was doing the guest speaker thing, and Dawn was like, hey, my friend's not going. I got you his key card or whatever, because you had to swipe your key card to get into the lecture. So I was like, holy cow. At this time, you got to keep in mind, I've only been playing electric guitar for a year or two, but I was like obsessed. My rig was really humble. I didn't have any money, so my rig was like, you know, that old blue telly that you'll see in the background sometimes in my videos, and a PV Bandit, you know, with a yellow overdrive pedal and a Dynacomp. Like, that's all I had. And I was gonna take out a loan from the bank to get a rig, right? I was like, I need a nice rig if I'm gonna play, and I guess I'm just gonna have to, you know, some teenagers get cars, you know, whatever. I'm gonna get rig. So anyways, I go into this thing and I see Dan, and he's there, and he's talking. All the kids are like, oh, when you're producing Keith Urban, or when you're producing this, and like, you know, it's very like kids trying to claw their way to the top, and they just know Dan as producer, you know, industry mogul kind of guy in town. I was there for Dan from Giant. Dan that could shred. Like, that's why I was there. I was there as a guitar fanboy. And obviously I snuck in. I didn't even go to school there. And I took a little pit guard. And after the lecture was over, I walked up to him and I was like, Dan, you're one of my favorite players. You know, can you sign this? And the dean of the school's next to me. He's like, it's in your handbooks. Keep in mind, I didn't go to school there. It's in your handbooks that you don't ask for autographs or guest speakers. You're breaking protocol. And Dan was like, no, it's cool, man. Dan's so cool, right? He signs it. He's like, oh, man, you play? And I was like, dude, Hard as a Lonely Hunter, you know, Time to Burn, like, Summer's Coming. He's like, oh, so you're a player? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, what's your rig? And I was like, man, I don't have anything nice. He's like, I just got this amp called a Diesel. And so Dan is the guy that turned me on to Diesel amps. And he's like, it sounds really great, you know, what kind of guitars are you into? And I was like, oh, man, you know, I've got this old Telly, and, you know, I'm thinking about getting maybe another nice guitar too. And he's like, yo, Tyler Guitars, Anderson Guitars. You know, he's like naming all these boutique companies. And he really opened my eyes to the boutique game. And it was one of the coolest things ever to sneak into this thing, you know, and just get to meet the guy. It was one of those like true hero moments, and then to get barked at from the dean. So to close out the story, right, he's like, oh man, thanks for coming, you know, Belmont's a great school, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yo, I don't even go here, man. And he's like, what? I was like, yeah. I was like, I snuck in. He's like, dude, you snuck into this? I was like, yeah, you're like one of my favorite players, dude. And he's like, oh man, that's awesome. He like gave me one of these big bro hugs. He's like, oh man, stay the course. It's kind of ironic. I ended up, you know, on the road with the Flats, which was an artist he produced. So Dan, if you watch this, that's my story, bro. I snuck into your thing. I'm the kid that snuck into Belmont. So yeah, you know, life's got a funny way of like making this big circle or whatever. Dan Huff, man, go dig through some pop records. He plays some great stuff on some Amy Grant records. He plays some great stuff on all kinds of 90s pop. A lot of Christian rock, like Christian pop stuff. It's like, you know, it'd be like a very safe kind of song. And then out of nowhere, here comes this ripping guitar solo. Other things, like I said, Shania Twain, that Summer's Coming solo is like a peak moment. Heart is a Lonely Hunter, which is the solo I played, to intro the episode. Giant, Time to Burn. And then, of course, those early Flats records. If you dig around on YouTube and you're looking for some great Dan Huff live moments, they're few and far between, man. There's one that's live, Giant Live in Japan, that rules. There's a series that was like it almost looks like one of those REH videos where he's sitting in his studio and he's teaching some stuff. It's killer. And he's wearing the flannel and he looks all 80s. I mean, I guess it is the 80s, but it's rad. Another great thing is this Little Walter jam. My buddy Phil, his name's Phil Bradbury. He builds these Little Walter amps. They're really, really good amps. And Phil's kind of like the world's most interesting man as far as like amp builders. Like he races cars and he used to do mining. Like Phil's great. And just to hear Phil tell stories is great. But anyways, Phil had this thing called the Little Walter Jam. And if you Google that or search it in YouTube, you'll find Dan Huff playing Ended His Lovers, like Jeff Beck. So Dan's hero is like Jeff Beck. Like that's one of his dudes, right? And like he's doing Ended His Lovers, and it's so freaking good. Yo, so another great Dan Huff moment. Thanks to my boy Travis Toy. Can't believe I'm even saying this, but it's Freebird. Like Winona from the Judds, Winona Judd. She had an album, and I think the last track on it was Freebird, like Skinner's Freebird. And you don't get to hear Dan play slide that much, and he plays some slide. But the outro solo is so ridiculously over the top, especially for like pop country. Like you don't hear guys just like sweeping and tapping and just going nuts. And the tones are great. So yeah, little roll call, like I said, all the things mentioned. But dude, that Winona Freebird thing is crazy good. Yeah, so dig up some Giant. Check out some 90s pop country, Clint Black, Reba McEntire. Check out the stuff he produced. Shadazy, Keith Urban, Rascal Flatts. I mean, Dan is like running the scene. He is Mr. Nashville now, and to come from the angle of of 80s shred guy to like studio session royalty to like producer himself it's cool. He's a mega influence. So yeah, I that's it, man. Under the Influence, Dan Huff. There you have it, guys. Until next time, guys, crispy high fives.